Hey, it's Eric.
And Lex.
And you're listening to the Cutting Room Floor podcast.
It's a weekly conversation devoted to diving deeper into the messages that were preached right here in our church on Sunday morning.
In an authentic space to Selah as we allow the Word of God to work into our everyday lives.
So hey, thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. Why don't you make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss a thing about what's happening on the Cutting Room Floor podcast.
So let's lean in and listen to today's conversation. Well, welcome back to the Cutting Room Floor podcast. Here we are once again, jumping into a great conversation today, right off the heels of what God did in our church yesterday as we gathered and we really dove into this whole subject of money. We finally talked about money in church. And I know it's a topic that so often people can feel maybe one way or another about. And for the first time, I've preached on money. And actually, I had a lot of fun doing it. And today, we're going to talk about just very practical, kind of pick up what was left on the cutting room floor to what does it look like to love Jesus, to live for God, to be surrendered to the ways of God, and steward, handle, grow, manage, give our money. And I know this topic is a massive one for all of us. Money affects every single one of us. Some of us are very happy with where we are at money-wise. Others of us may be a bit discouraged. Some of us confused. What does the Bible actually say? We're going to dive into all the things, and we're glad that you're joining us. Pray that it encourages you and blesses you. And let's dig into the conversation today.
Let's dig in.
Money.
Money.
What a topic.
What a topic.
Honestly, I said to the church yesterday, we've been consistently preaching just about every weekend for 2 years, basically now, and I have yet, me and you together. I mean, every week we do a little tithe or offering, word of encouragement, but to really preach about money. And we did that yesterday. It was fun.
Yeah.
We really came around even bigger than that, just the topic of surrender.
Yep.
We have a calling as followers of Jesus to live surrendered and look at the story of the rich young ruler and really his issue at the end of the day had nothing to do with money.
Right.
Although that's kind of what it seems like at surface level. It had everything to do with his heart and his inability to surrender his heart. Money had his heart more than Jesus did.
Yep.
And Jesus wanted his heart, and he wants our hearts, and so does money. So I'm curious, what were your thoughts on yesterday? How'd you process it? And anything on your mind?
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was one of the best messages on money that I've heard.
Wow.
I really enjoyed it. And I loved looking at the story of the rich young ruler. Mm-hmm. And I loved looking at our lives and just like the realization that what all of us have in common is that we all have to work with money.
Yeah.
Like nobody just like gets to be like, oh, I don't have to deal with money. It's not something that I live with.
Yeah.
All of us live and deal with and have concerns with or questions about money and about finances. And so I think to not talk about it would be a miss because Jesus talked about it. Right. And you talked about this yesterday, which I thought was great. Jesus talks about money so much throughout the Gospels. And if Jesus talks about it, then I think we need to talk about it. But I think sometimes people can be like, oh, I don't want to talk about money because either I feel uncomfortable or maybe I feel ashamed.
Yep.
Or maybe I just feel like I don't want anybody to tell me what to do with my money. Or maybe I disagree with what the church thinks. There's a lot of different things.
At times in church, it can feel self-serving.
It can feel self-serving.
It's like you're bringing up money because you want me to give you my money.
Right.
And so I really try to avoid that because that's a part of our money is to give to God.
Sure.
But I think, to get beyond some of those immediate, hey, don't talk about that.
Right.
Let's just take a moment. Let's pause. Let's actually talk about it and do it from the right perspective.
Do it from the right perspective and talk about money to help people. Mm-hmm. Not just to be, hey, bring your tithe, though that's important, but to help people of, hey, God wants your heart to be free. Mm-hmm. He wants your heart to be healthy, to be content, to be grateful. Yeah. And one of the things that money can do if we're not careful is it can attach itself to the desires of our heart. Yep. And it can get us in a place of discontentment. Yep. It can get us in a place of greed. And as followers of Jesus, we're actually called to live above that, to realize that we are not our wealth. We are not our possessions. We are not what we have or do not have. We are not our positions. We are not our leadership titles. We are children of God. And at one of these days, when we go on to be with the Lord, everything that we have, it really just kind of like goes away, right? Maybe you can pass down things to your children and your children's children. That's beautiful. But like we are not what we have.
Right.
And I think that goes against a lot of the culture of the world. That is buy more, get more, do more, save more, invest more, buy a bigger house, get a better car. And like that, what you have defines you in a way. And I think that Jesus is really clear that like God knows what you need before you need it. He knows, like, don't worry about those things. Pagans worry about those things, what they should wear, what they should eat. Like that's not a worry that we're meant to have.
Yep.
And but I think it's important to start from, we talked about this when we talk about money, like starting from a place of realizing that God actually isn't concerned with money.
Yeah.
He's concerned, like you said, with money having you, that you can have a lot of money and your heart can be in a place of surrender, or you can have a little money and your heart cannot be in a place of 100%. Surrender, or you can have a little money and your heart can be in a place of surrender, or a lot of money and not be in a place of surrender. It's not about how much money. It's actually simply about your heart.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think that was kind of one of my big takeaways from the story of the rich young ruler is Jesus isn't concerned about us having money.
No.
He's not concerned about, how much wealth. And again, like wealth is so contextual. Like
totally.
The rich young ruler, like we would be more rich than he was. So like like in his day and age, what he had access to compared to what we do, and how wealthy the average American is versus how wealthy someone in a third world country is. Like, what is wealth?
It's all relative.
It's all relative. Mm-hmm. So again, it's not about a dollar amount. And I said this yesterday, Jesus isn't concerned about us having money.
Yep.
He's concerned about money having us.
Yep.
Maybe even more specifically, he's concerned about money having your heart.
Yeah.
And so I think this is the key here is when it comes to money. All right, Lord, how do I make sure to guard and protect my heart from following the path of the world, which is a path of greed or of discontentment, or if I have to have more, or of selfishness? How do I follow your way and manage money well?
Yeah.
And what does that look like? Like, what does that even mean? And so we tried to do our best. I did my best yesterday to put some thoughts, that very practical thoughts of what that looks like. Things like budgeting, things like avoiding debt, things like working hard, having a work ethic, things like giving, being generous, developing a generous spirit rather than a stingy spirit, and tithing. I mean, all that's included in that mix. And so it was, I think, hopefully helpful. And I think for us, I think a good thing to maybe start today on the podcast is like, what's our story with money?
Yeah.
It's probably something we've never really talked, I mean, you have talked about, but never talked to anybody else about. And
our money testimony.
Our money, our it's a mestimony is what it is.
That's so bad.
But I think I read this stat yesterday. The number one cause for divorce in America is money fights and money problems.
Yep.
And if you follow Dave Ramsey or some of the kind of Christian money talk people, they'll often mention that as well. And I think it's fascinating actually, because you think about all the things you could fight about.
Yeah.
And that the number one reason people go, it's not working, I can't do this anymore, is because of a money problem, a money issue, a money fight. Like, again, why? Money gets to your heart.
It gets to your heart, and it causes stress.
It causes stress. It's not just about the dollars in your wallet.
Yeah.
Your wallet's a window into your heart.
Yeah.
So,
and it shows your differences in marriage, your priorities, your values.
Who's a spender, who's a saver, all the things. So I think for us, that'd be interesting maybe just to a little bit, because I think people can relate, probably, is my assumption. Can relate to our story, and we could talk about it. So, I mean, for me, I grew up so I was the youngest child.
You're the baby.
Of 4 children, the baby. And grew up in probably what I think many of us would think is stereotypical, like home life, like great mom and dad, obviously, loving each other. And my dad did, maybe stereotypically, like he took care of the money. Yeah. Like men take care of the finances. Yeah. And so, honestly, and I think my mom will probably listen to this, like, knowing exactly the dollars and cents and accounting for all that, that's not her strength. She's a great visionary. Yeah. She loves to spend and buy and take some risks.
She'll make some money and
she
have
knows
some ideas. And
she knows how to make money.
She does,
I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
But my dad's always been the one to kind of manage it. And so I think me and you, kind of walked into marriage assuming that was to be our story.
Yeah.
As the baby of the family, and then maybe it's just my wiring. Like, if people, are you a spender or a saver?
Yeah, Eric, what are you? Are you a spender or a saver?
I am a spender, And here's the thing. I'm not just a spender on everything. I'm a spender on the nice things.
Yeah, you don't want you don't want the cheap thing. You don't even want the middle of the line thing. You want the most expensive option. Because in your mind, if it's more expensive,
quality.
it's got to be better.
Yes, I'm about quality. And I think you got to spend on quality, all right? You want leather goods. I don't want pleather.
No, we can't do pleather. I agree. I'm with you there.
I'm buying leather.
Yeah.
And if I'm eating a meal, and if I can get the chicken sandwich for 15,
right?
But if I can get the steak for 22, you're an
upcharge king.
Let's get the steak.
You're an upcharge king. Yeah, you'll upcharge it. Upcharge it.
Hey, I have discipline. I'm learning. We're learning. But that's a little bit my wiring. And I think we walked into marriage. Your family was the same. Your mom didn't work. Your dad worked, and in your family as well. Your dad took care of the finances. And so we walked into marriage early on, and I think we kind of didn't know what we were doing. We didn't have a budget.
Nobody does. Yeah.
We didn't. We just are finally making money.
We were 22 and 23.
Right.
Yeah.
We were young. In Bible college and figuring it out. But when it came to money, we just didn't talk about it. Mm-mm. And I think the assumption was
not on purpose. It wasn't we're never going to talk about it. We just kind of lived.
And I think your assumption was Eric's probably taking care of it. Yeah. That's his job. That's his role.
Yeah. You got this, babe.
You got this. You're doing it, right? Yeah. You're looking after it. And we didn't have kids and some responsibilities early on as well. But the truth is I wasn't. On occasion, I'm scared to look at our checking account because I'm I wonder what's in there. I'm nervous. I remember I would get anxiety opening up
the bank anxiety.
I would get anxiety opening up the banking app oh no, what's LMCU gonna show me today? It's this is your money. What's the problem with that?
You're 23. All we really had was $3,000, right? We were just in Bible school.
But I think eventually, though, the truth of our story is that it was chill at first, but it wasn't chill eventually.
Yeah.
Eventually, it became a problem.
Yeah.
Because I think what it created is when we weren't stewarding what we had, when we weren't living on a budget, when we weren't mindful and intentional, putting our money where it needed to go, is we found ourselves coming up to surprise emergency, medical bills or surprise, again, Bible college things. And at times we were uh-oh, how are we going to pay for that? We checked our account and there's nothing there.
Right.
I got too many steaks. What do we do? Right. And I remember for our marriage, it would cause us some frustration.
Yeah.
And I think it caused you some frustration because I think, you can tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I think your feeling was, Eric, this is your job.
Yeah.
You should be doing this.
Right.
And honestly, for the first number of years of our marriage, I think we kind of lived in that state.
Yep.
It would come in and out. We'd go in and out of that.
Yep.
And we never really got real disciplined, never got a budget.
We were always tithing and we were always had income, great income. We just never knew where our money was going.
Yep.
We always had enough, but it was always kind of cool. We weren't stewarding it. I think that's probably where we lived.
Yeah.
We weren't stewarding it.
Yeah, and thankfully we had enough wisdom from people to say, hey, avoid debt. So we did our best to avoid debt. But talk to me about then when that changed, kind of what happened.
So I feel we were in that season a little bit of tension for a few years where it'd be hey, somebody should be really looking after this. Are you going to do it? And you're kind of I don't know if I'm I don't feel super passionate about it. I'm okay, maybe I'll try it. And then I would do it. And maybe this is a little too honest, but I hope it helps somebody. But I would do it and then I would be resentful about it because I felt this is something Eric's supposed to be doing. Why am I doing this? Why shouldn't he be doing this? And so I would do it. I would, make a budget, do the plan, all the things. But then I would feel actually angry about it. And then you can't really maintain something when you're just doing something out of resentment. So then I wouldn't do it. And then you would try to pick it back up again. And then I would try to pick it back up. And it basically went back and forth until I think in maturity we realized, hey, we're on the same team. Mm-hmm. I feel we were playing, we knew we were on the same team, but in this area of our lives, we were kind of are you going to, who's doing this? Mm-hmm. And I think we finally got to a place when we had kids, when we were okay, one of us needs to look after this. One of us needs to make sure we're being intentional with this. One of us needs to make sure that our goals for the future are going to be accomplished. We need to be thinking about 50 years down the road, not next month. Mm-hmm. And so I think I just kind of said hey, I'll do this. I'll absorb this. And I'm not going to do it with resentment, which I think the Lord had to work maturity within me. I'm not going to do this with resentment because I'm doing this for us and for our family. And it's just because it's what I might be naturally a little bit more good at. Like it comes more natural to me. And I think that's why, since it came so natural to me in our early years of marriage, you think what comes natural to you comes natural to your spouse. So like, oh, this is so easy. Like it should be easy for you. But you're like, no, this doesn't come natural for me. But the things that come natural for you don't come natural for me. And I think that takes humility in marriage to kind of finally like realize like, okay, there are things that I'm good at that maybe I always thought that my spouse would do based on their upbringing, based on my anticipation or expectation of marriage. But actually I'm good at these, and like it's okay for me to absorb these. And there's things that Eric's better at that I thought I would be on my plate, but he's better at them. And so it's going to take humility on my part to let him do those things, realizing that we are a team. So I feel like right when we had Olive, I kind of sat down and was like, it was my one goal for the year. Like, I'm going to get a hold of our financial life. And so I sat down with some Dave Ramsey podcasts. Like, something people don't know about me is I like actually love finance. I love talking about money. I love talking about savings and the future and investing. So I sat down and started listening to Dave Ramsey a lot, made a plan for us to pay off. I think we had a little bit of our car debt left. So we paid that off. Made a whole budget, figured out exactly what was coming in, exactly what was coming out. And I hope this helps somebody today, because when I did that, I actually realized we're in a better place than I thought we were. And I think the anxiety that comes around money is the anxiety of the unknown.
Yep, I think it's
so
huge.
You're anxious because you're like, I don't know what we have. I don't know what we don't have. I don't know what's going on. I don't even want to open up my account. You're anxious because you haven't been intentional.
Yep.
But when you actually sit down and you do the work and you're intentional and you're understanding how much you have and how much you don't have and what you can spend and what you can't, it actually brings peace to you.
Yeah, it does.
A plan brings peace to you. So I sat down, started that. We got the apps and connected our bank account, all the things. And then I made an appointment to sit down with one of our friends who's in this world, the financial world. And I said, hey, talk to us, said friend. I want you to talk to me about what we need to be doing so that our future and our retirement is set up. Like, how much do we need to be investing? How do I do it? Help me to click the right buttons. I have no idea how to do this. So he sat down with us.
So we literally, just for what, like, again, we're kind of like in the nuance here, but we literally had a Zoom calls with this individual, and there's, you could find a financial advisor that would do this. And he helped us not only figure out a plan, where's your income, where are you going, what do you desire, but literally we walked through when it comes to our retirement accounts, when it comes to our investments, when it comes to our children's college funds, when it comes to our future, how much we're adding onto our mortgage to try to pay that down. He helped us go into those websites and click the actual buttons.
Click the buttons.
Not just like, hey, that's a good idea, I should be doing that. But then I get to like Schwab.com and I don't know what the heck I'm doing.
Because it's so
I'm
confusing.
Confused.
And he said this. He said they make it confusing on purpose.
Yeah.
So you're not stupid if you don't understand what you're doing. Because he said, he's like,
get some help.
You're actually smart, but you just don't know this world. Just get some help. So I would encourage you.
It would be like someone who's never read the Bible being asked to now break down the Greek and Hebrew.
To do an exegesis of that.
Of these words. You just don't know what you're doing
You don't know
yet.
what you're doing.
You can learn it.
You're smart. You don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I'd encourage anybody, if you're kind of in that space, like, hey, we just need some help, some planning, some goals. Get a financial advisor. I know that Dave Ramsey has some on their website if you use them. I think there's multiple in town. Reach out. I can refer you to the person who helped us that we had known and loved. But anyways, it really helped us because we knew, okay, if we follow this plan, we are going to be good for our future. And God's going to help us and he's going to bless us. But I think that if we're not stewarding what we have, I don't know if we can expect God to give us more. If we're faithful with the little, we will be faithful with much. And I think that for us, we had to learn, I'm going to be faithful. We're going to be faithful with the little. We're going to know what's coming in. We're going to know what's going out. We're going to give our tithe and we're going to bring our offering. We're going to invest into our future. We're going to invest into our kids' future. Like, we're going to do the best that we can with what we have right now. And with doing that, then we can believe that God will bless us more. He'll give us more because he knows that we're trustworthy stewards. So that probably took a year though. Like, it took a whole year process of meeting with this guy probably 4 or 5 times, setting up all of our different accounts, learning the world of, for us it's a 403B, but 401k and then additional Roth IRA. I mean, like, all the things we just didn't know anything about it. And so it probably took a good year and learning to stay consistent with the budget, learning to save, like, all the things. It doesn't happen automatically. Like, you really have to put your hand to it. But what I can say is that it's given us peace. Like, I really think that it's helped us to experience rest of like, all right, Lord, we trust you. We know that we're doing due diligence with what you've given us. And so we can rest that like all is well. We've looked ahead to our future. I don't need to worry because I know what's going on in that area of our life. And I think it's helped our marriage.
Yeah, no, I do. And I think that's the big one. I think it's helped our marriage because I think it gives you the ability to communicate. I think it helps you know, like, gives you right language. I think you have to work through a lot of that. I think you've got to have honest conversations, to your point, to where you try to avoid the resentment, get unguarded. Let's be on the same team. We're the same team fighting for the same thing. What's that phrase we always say? You're not the problem. The problem's the problem. Right?
Yep. You're not the problem. The problem's
My spouse isn't the problem. Money's not the problem. Well, money might be the problem. The problem's the problem. Anyway, you get it. The point is, I think working through that, again, sometimes, I said this yesterday at church, and I think it's so important. This podcast is, like, I think these kinds of things, money, budgeting, stewarding, investing, like taking care, giving, I think all of this can feel so not spiritual. Like, man, your pastors, aren't you supposed to be talking about prayer? Shouldn't you be talking about fasting? Or shouldn't you be addressing the end times and getting deep? Like, that's great. All that's good. There's room for prayer and end times and fasting and all the things. But here's the truth. People live in this world right here.
This is everybody's world.
And the conversations we have with people in our church, people who reach out, it's often not about their opinion of the end times.
No.
It's often about my marriage is breaking down because we can't communicate. My life's breaking down.
My spouse isn't respecting me and they're spending whatever they want. And they're not talking to me about it.
So, like, I think sometimes people that want to talk about money sometimes, but money seems to be one of the most important things for us to talk about.
Which is why I think Jesus talked about it.
Which is why Jesus talked about it. And I just think it's way more spiritual than we can realize. Having a budget, that's called spiritual discipline.
Right.
That's called saying, God, whatever I want, I'm not just going to go spend and hope it all works out. No, I'm going to honor you. I'm going to steward what's been entrusted to me by guarding it, by having a budget. I know where it's going. And I think this kind of conversation, my hope is for people and for us too, like that it can actually, you can find surrender here. Rather than money having your heart making you anxious, making you greedy, making you prideful, making you discontent. Your heart can actually live in the joy of surrender. When you say, God, everything I have is yours. I trust you. I'm going to do my best with it. I'm going to guard what I have. I'm going to trust that you're my provider. I'm going to work hard. And I think that's the calling that God's given us. That's the spiritual formation journey. This is one major aspect of it that I think we've all got to walk.
Totally.
If we're going to become who God's called us to be.
I think that's great. I think there's a few things we should talk about that are practical but really important when it comes to money as a married couple. One is, I think it's really important to share a bank account. And I think we can think like, oh, that's so simple. But realistically, many marriages, even Christian marriages, have separate bank accounts. And I think it's important that when two become one, everything in your life becomes one. Right? It's not just like Eric and I are married, but I'm going to work and get my own money and he's going to work and get his own money and we do our best to kind of split it down the middle. Like, no, if I stayed home, the money Eric brings into the household is our money. If I work, the money we both bring into the household is our money. And so I think that's just really important. And if that's something that you struggle with, I would suggest to seek some counsel. Like, go talk with a pastor if you're listening to this, or somebody in your world, because God actually wants more oneness for you in your marriage than that. So that's one thing. Two, I think it's important when you look at your finances as a couple to figure out if there's anything you're hiding. And I think some people are like, well, I don't want restrictions around my money or how I spend my money. For us, like if it's anything over $100 or I think sometimes over $50, we'll just tell each other like, hey, I'm about to buy this, or hey, I'm going to grab this. Want to make sure that we're on the same page. Is it because I feel controlled? Absolutely not. It's because it's a mutual, like, hey, we're a family. We're building something together. And so if I'm going to grab something, if I'm going to invest in something, buy something, I want us to make sure that we're on the same page. Because I think where tension can come from people we've talked with is one couple, one spouse, or both spouses sometimes will just kind of do their own thing. And then it can cause so much tension.
So much.
Because it's hidden. It's not talked about.
And again, it comes back to your heart. The goal of marriage is intimacy.
It's intimacy.
And that's all, again, related to our heart. It's not sex honesty, or it's not date nights. It's connection. And honesty is the core fabric of how you build intimacy. And if you don't have honesty, you won't have intimacy.
You won't.
Your intimacy is a lie without honesty. And so, if I'm kind of doing my own thing with my money and kind of somewhat hiding. I remember a conversation I had years ago with a guy As a young guy, he was married, and he was bragging to me and a few other men about how, he went and bought the new pair of Jordans and how he didn't tell his wife. And, he just walked home and said, look, babe, this is what I got now. And she was like frustrated. She was upset by this. And he was like laughing, like joking, like I kind of do what I want. And I thought, buddy, you are an idiot. Yeah. That's exactly what I thought in my head. I thought, dude, you keep living that way, you're going to end up as that number one cause for divorce is money fights and money problems. Yeah. You're an idiot. You shouldn't do that's breaking trust. It's cool, you get to brag to your friends you got new shoes. Yeah. Well done. I like your shoes. Not really, as your marriage breaks down. Yeah. It's a silly example, but I think actually people can be tempted to live that way. And I think it's a real pit you got to avoid. Yeah.
Or like you see the viral trend of like women being like hiding all their Amazon purchases. Right. And it's like, at first it's funny, but then you're like, man, I don't want to live in hiding in anywhere of my marriage. That's right. In our sex life, I don't want to live in hiding. In our financial life, I don't want to live in hiding. In how we parent and our relationships with others, I don't want to live in hiding. That's great. So I think that in order to like not feel like walking in eggshells or oh no, or what if he sees this what if my husband sees this on our account? What if he sees that I went I think it's honestly like just avoid that and have conversations about it and learn to talk and learn to because what that reveals to me is there's an area in your marriage you're not on the same team. Yep. What it reveals to me is, hey, there's just an area of improvement that we can grow in together. So
no, I think it's great. I think it's super practical. Yeah. And I think it's really, really important. And then I think last thing to add, you had those two. Well, one more for me in marriage and money. I think just practical advice is like have shared goals.
Yeah, I think that's so good.
I think you've again, when you make your budget, like Dave Ramsey talks about this. So we're kind of just like echoing some of his stuff. But one thing that we try to do our best is like you don't make the budget and then police me on it. No, we make the budget and we police ourselves on it.
And one of us probably takes the lead. Yeah, like I take the lead in that, but then we look at it together.
Yeah, we get it, like both husband and wife get to speak into that. Where you're putting your money, where it's going.
Nobody's controlling.
Are you putting extra towards your mortgage or not? Are you saving some? Are you buying new clothes this month? Like what are you doing with it? Yep. And to be able to have open communication, but even bigger than that, I mean that's a goal. Your monthly goals. Even bigger than that, your life goals. Mm-hmm. Like me and you talk about this a lot. Like, God, where are you taking us? Yeah. And what are some of the dreams in our heart? Yeah. Like, what would it be like one day to have a home that have a home like this that when our kids are in high school, their friends all want to come to. And that'd be a goal.
Like what?
It'd be a dream.
Does your heart love?
What are we building? I talked about it yesterday. Setting goals for giving. Yeah. Like God, this year, for us, like what's possible for giving? Yeah. Like part of this journey we haven't even talked about is over the past couple of years as we've gotten ourselves on budgets and gotten our plan. One of the things we've been doing is pushing the needle in our giving. Yeah. Every year, like God, we want to give a little more. We want to give a little more. Like we want to keep cultivating generosity. So what is that? What's a shared goal for your generosity this year as a family? I think when you can get on that helps you get on the same team.
I think so too.
And you start fighting for things. Or, hey, we want to buy a car. Yeah. So all right, come on, shared goal. Yeah. Let's work towards this. Let's save money. Yeah. Let's cut out both of us. Let's cut out coffees or whatever and save towards this goal together.
Totally. I think it's important to mention, you talked about not taking on debt yesterday, but I think the reality is, and we both agree with this, that like sometimes you do have to take on debt for a car or for whatever. And the goal is to take out as little as possible and to pay it down as fast as possible. Yeah. And so I think that though is all things like to be on the same page about the decisions you're making, about where you're going, about what you're dreaming for. And I think if you, just like a goal in your work life, if you never write down the goal and make a plan, you're never going to get there. Yep. So I think in our financial life with you and your spouse, if you never write down a goal and make a plan, you're probably never going to get there. Mm-hmm. Like it doesn't just happen. Like things aren't just like, okay, we're just going to do this and then we hope for the best. Like, no, you have to make a plan. Yep. So, and then I think ultimately like learning just to bring all of it to God. Yep. I remember when we were last year, we felt like the Lord encouraged us to give more than we ever had before to a specific offering. And we were both kind of like, can we do this? Like this is like a stretch for us. And we felt encouraged and like compelled to do this and then to take a list and write down every way that God blessed us as we stepped out in faith. Yep. And so we made a running list. But you know what? That was like so good for our marriage because it was such a great step of like, we stepped out and did this. And then we also remembered all the ways that God had been good to us, so that when we step out again in the future, we can like look back at that and we can remember together, like, okay, God's been faithful to us and he'll be faithful again. And when we step out and take a risk together, he's always going to meet us there. So I think all of that is just so healthy. But I think that our journey has been one of finding oneness in this area of our life. And I think it's drawn us closer together. I think it's made us feel like more of a team. I think it's taken away any sense of competition or any sense of resentment. Like, I think that it's really helped us to be unified in every area of our life. So
no, I think it's so good. I always encourage someone who's listening today. Like, I know, again, everyone's story is different. And maybe you're listening today, and again, we're not perfect. We're still growing and building. And maybe you're listening today feeling discouraged. You're like, man, like, well, I do have a lot of debt. Or I have
a lot of student loans. Or
we are dealing with issues in my marriage right now because of this. And I'm not where you're at, where you guys sat down and like, we're not there. And I don't have a budget and I don't know how to do any of this. And, you know, I talked to somebody yesterday, I'm dyslexic. Like, none of this makes sense to me. Like, none of the numbers align for me. I just want to encourage you, like, there's hope. Remember, we talked about this yesterday, ultimately in surrender, we trust God. He's your provider. He can help you. And then my encouragement is for you, like anything, you just got to take one step at a time. Start with one small thing. Start with this week making a budget. What are your expenses you're planning this week? What's your income look like? How can you make that work? Then do another week. Then do a month. Start with one conversation with your spouse. Just in vulnerability, opening your heart. Hey, can we talk about this? Start, doing some research. All right, how do I pay off debt? Again, we've talked about him a lot. Dave Ramsey is a great resource. There's many others out there. I just want to encourage you, there's hope. Like, you can build something different for your future. You made some decisions to get where you are, but you don't have to stay where you are. And you can make different decisions to get out of it. And actually to grow, to build. There's hope. There's light at the end of the tunnel for you. And I do think one of the ways that we be formed into the image of Jesus is taking care of our money. And thanking him, honoring him for it. I'd encourage you, as you're listening today, let's do that. Let's say, God, what does it look like this week for me to really consider that my money's yours and I'm going to honor you with it, and pray as we do that we'd see our lives blessed and that we continue to be able to bless others. So love you all. Thanks for joining us for the Cutting Room Floor podcast. Much love. We'll see you soon.